Hello students, welcome to the Analyst for 27th April 2024, where we will be trying to understand the most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. The very first article of today is about the recent RBI norms for the loan products in the country. In the next article, we'll be looking at a very important special power of the Supreme Court known as the Curative Petition and Curative Jurisdiction. In the third article, we'll be looking at the very basic features of Glacial, Lex and the recent data from ISRO from remote sensing on the same. In the fourth article, we'll be looking at a special feature of the electronic voting machines known as the system loading units and the recent controversies regarding the same. And in the last article, we'll be looking at some special species of coral which are preserved in zoos. And finally, we'll be concluding the discussion with Prelims Snippets, which are specially curated information from the newspapers for your prelims examination, which is coming soon. So hello students, welcome to the very first article. In here we will be looking at the recent norms set by the Reserve Bank of India for the loan products in the country. A very important article from your prelims, which is economic and social development, and also from GS3 in mains, where we have Indian economy as a topic here. Now here we will be trying to understand what the detailed aspect of the issue is. Now when we talk about loan products, we have to talk about loan service providers, and breaking the term into various sub words, we find that we have loan, service and providers. Now these are the kind of people, these are the service providers who actually deals with the disbursement or say the issuance and distribution of loans to the various customers. Now imagine a customer such as Raju. Now Raju requires a loan to set up a business in say a prime area of Delhi for cafe. Now for that cafe, Raju requires a loan from say possibly a bank, possibly an NBFC, but maybe Raju does not have many connections with the banks and so on. But what Raju has may be a connection with a local service provider who is a company or who is a website or who can be anyone, any individual who has connection with those banks or with those NBFCs, and on their behalf that particular company will be giving a loan to Raju. Now this is a kind of an intermediary service if you can call, right? These loan service providers are giving to their customers, right? Now when we discuss about the types of loan service providers in the nation, we have generally the various non-banking financial companies. For example, we have Bajaj, we have Mahindra Finance, right? So these are the kinds of individuals or the companies which gives this kind of loans by serving as an intermediary. Right? We also have the microfinance institutions who actually give loans to people who are unbanked, and these people, these unbanked individuals are generally those kind of individuals belonging to the poorer sections of the populations who do not have access to formal banking channels or formal lending channels. Maybe they depend on their local money lenders who actually charge very high interest rates. So these loan service providers can also be microfinance institutions who are located at grassroots level, and they also have connections with the big banks such as SBI, PNB, or even the private banks of the nation such as HDFC, ICICI and so on. So they on their behalf actually give loans to this kind of individuals. Next, we also have the various new age technological based companies who are known as fintech or financial technological companies, who also totally exist on a online platform, say a particular website, say a particular app from the Play Store, right? So after downloading the apps from the Play Store of a particular company, right, who gives loans, you can easily file application for loans, you can easily look at the various loan offers and so on the particular websites. So these companies are also known as loan service providers. Now we have to look at the various functions which are offered by the LSPs or the loan service providers. The very first is actually looking at the loan origination. When we talk about the loan origination, these particular NBFCs, microfinance institutions, or say websites and applications, right, which are generally geared by the startups, they look at the various loan provisions by firstly identifying the borrowers. So they will be identifying the borrowers who requires loans, right? They will be gathering applications for them, and they will be also looking at the various paperwork for the loans. Paperwork can be related to collecting the Aadhaar card of the borrower. It can be looking at the various address proofs and various other identification documents that are needed for a particular borrower to take loan. And here they will be also looking at the credit history of the individual who is actually looking for loans, right? That is known as credit assessment. So they will be looking into past records of the individual, how timely they have paid back the loans in time, and so on. And then they will be going on with the loan processing. And in this step, it is a very, very crucial step, because here the borrower has applied for the loans, right? Now the loan service providers, they will be connecting with their partner banks. The partner banks can be State Bank of India, HDFC, any bank in the nation. It can be an NBFC also, right? It can be anyone, right, who is actually giving the loan to them, and finally they are giving the loans to the borrowers, right? So here we can understand that they are actually serving as an intermediary, and here they will be taking care of all the loans processing by contacting these banks, and they will be, when they will be finally giving the loans, they will be also giving the same to the borrowers. They will be maintaining a separate account of the borrowers, and everything has to be maintained by them. And here, with respect to any issues coming out from the loan, say for example the borrower is not paying the loan back, or say borrowers are having some issues knowing the terms and conditions of the loans, they will be also providing the customer service. And finally, the main amount of money which is taken as a loan, they will be also giving to the same, right, to the borrowers. And finally they will be also extracting all the charges and the fees and fines from the borrowers in the same. Now here we need to look at another term here which the RBI has specially focused on. These are known as web lending aggregators. Now these are just loan service providers only, but they are just located, say, on a particular website. For example, say imagine a particular company or a application like Paytm, right, or say there are other applications, right, PhonePe and so on, who are known as aggregators. That means they have various services under a single app. Now imagine a similar website who is carrying on the functions of, say, giving these loans, right? And there can be many banks, many NBFCs, many LSPs themselves also who can list on this website. So it is actually a single platform where all the borrowers can just log into. They can look into the various loans and offered by various companies at what kind of interest rates. So based on their suitable choices, based on their affordability of the loans, based on the duration of the loans, they can identify many loan providers and they can easily select from the same. Now this is what we know as web lending aggregators. And here recently the government of India has also designed an architecture or the design of how these web aggregators should be designed for. Now here is the customer who is actually signing on the website, say using his or her own name, email address and date of birth, and say PAN card, Aadhaar card and so on, and they get registered on the website. Now this website will be having the financial information providers such as banks, mutual fund companies, insurance providers, any other kind of financial services, right? And here on the other side, we'll be also having various other flow-based credit, personal finance management, will management, right? So here, various other will, say providers, say loan service providers will also be located. So on this particular platform, we see that there are so many individuals, and here a particular registry also have to be kept. And here this registry will be the data of the various borrowers, and this data has to be kept properly protected with various data protection norms too. So this is the various amount of, say, measures which have been taken for the proper functioning of the web lending applications and the aggregators. Now we are discussing this loan service providers and the various norms which we'll be looking just in the next slide in the context of overall financial inclusion agenda of the government of India and also of the RBI. Now when we talk about financial inclusion, we are talking about including those unbanked kind of populations, those sections of the populations who are not covered by the basic banking services. And when we talk about basic banking services, we talk about deposits, we talk about loans, and these are the basic banking services which the people of the country, such as agricultural workers, migrant laborers, small MSME owners, they need to set up new businesses, they need to expand their business operations, they need to even continue their businesses, right? So we need financial inclusion on the same lines, and that is why one of the very first initiatives from 2014 till present was actually the initiation of this program known as the Jan Dhan Bank accounts. Now under this program, the government of India saw that every person in this country must be having bank accounts, and here the government of India made it very simple for the people of the country to open bank accounts, and right now as we look at the data, we find that only around 8% of the people have zero balance in those Jan Dhan accounts. Now it is a very positive kind of development because we find that very few people are actually keeping zero balances. Now that means that people are actually using the bank accounts, and also we can see more than 50% or say exactly 56% of the Jan Dhan accounts are actually women beneficiaries. Next, we find that the internet connectivity within the nation has also improved to around 46%. And here, when we talk about internet connectivity, we are talking about the spread of smartphones, the popularity of 5G, 4G connectivity among the people. And here, when the people have these kind of services, they can use financial services, they can use apps like UPI apps, like say the loan service provider applications, websites more efficiently. And this is also seen as of now. Next, the government also liberalized the digital banking units, or you can just imagine these are banks just operating on a digital platform. That means these are banks where all the platforms, all the transaction, everything starting from say opening of bank account, transferring of funds, withdrawal of funds, everything is happening on a digital platform, right? So RBI is also allowed the operation of these banks, and these are also sometimes called the neo banks in the nation, because they are new age or neo banks in the country. Next, RBI also liberalized many norms for facilitating doorstep banking. So whenever the people of the country, particularly women and the elderlies, they need any basic banking services for which maybe they do not have proper financial inclusion, for them the government of India and also the RBI has introduced Bank Mitras. Bank Mitras are known as also business correspondents of the various banks such as SBI, such as PNB and so on, who has actually dedicated a particular special individual, special agent for the banks to cater to this kind of people who need financial inclusion directly at their doorstep. So this is also a very, very innovative kind of a program that is going on. Then we have the norms of video KYCs, e-signature, which has been totally made online and totally digital and very simple for the people to actually use, open bank account, take loans on the particular websites and so on. And also we have the integration of PAN and Aadhaar card to our bank account. So this is also making business more easier by actually integrating the business operations with GST returns, with the income tax returns of the various individuals. So everything is actually connected on a digital platform, and this all kind of data, right, and all kind of government schemes and the good improvements that we have seen here is actually making the ease of doing banking more easier, making the ease of people to take more and more loan products from the loan service providers. But here we have some issues with the financial inclusion. We see that right now there have been many media reports that many people are getting into the trap of digital loans. You must have probably heard about many girls particularly who are being trapped in these digital loan applications, who are unregulated and who are illegal. That means they are not registered with the RBI, and they give out loans in large amounts intentionally to those people who cannot even pay the loan back. And when they cannot pay the loans back, they are actually calling, say, the illegal banks, right, illegal loan applications. They're actually calling the relatives, they are calling the friends of the borrowers, and they are totally defacing them and insulting them in front of people. And this is also leading to many mental health issues and even suicides in many of the sections of the populations. And that can also be reflected here based on the complaints regarding the illegal digital lending apps, right? You can see Maharashtra is leading the number of complaints, right, followed by Karnataka and so on, out of the total applications or complaints of around 2,500. And this is just in a period of 1 year from, in 2021. The figure right now is even much higher. And that is why the RBI has right now proposed various norms to regulate these loan service providers. Now, earlier also in 2022-2023, RBI released 6 commandments to the banks on digital lending, right? It actually told about the various strict rules and regulations with the RBI and the various banks and the various loan service providers definitely have to adhering to actually cater to the loan applications in the nation. And right now the RBI told that they must be, or say the borrowers must be given a digital view of all the loan programs and the loan applications on their website. That means the borrowers must be easily knowing the name of the bank from which it is taking loans, from which they are actually taking loans, or the NBFC, right? They must also be knowing about the loan amount and the total tenure, or means the tenure of the loan or the time period of the loan, right? They must be having a transparency on the annual percentage rate of the interest. For example, say if the annual percentage rate is around say 12% of the loan, say of the total loan, this 12% must not be having any hidden charges, right? There cannot be any hidden charges in the same, right? Then we also have to have various other key terms and conditions on the loan application itself. Then all the key fact statement of each lender must be individually listed on the website of the lenders and also the web aggregators of the loan service providers. Next, they cannot also promote any kind of specific lender, right, on their platforms, and also they cannot use any misleading tactics such as manipulative tactics to actually influence the borrowers into taking more loans. So these norms are obviously coming as benefits to the borrowers. Firstly, the borrowers can easily compare the loan offers on a single platform, and finally they can make an informed decision as to reduce the number of complaints from illegal banking units and illegal loan units. In the next one, we'll be looking at a very important piece of editorial in the Hindu on the curative jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Now, this is following the recent Delhi Metro Rail Corporation Limited versus the Delhi Airport Metro Express Private Limited, and this is the recent Supreme Court case of 2024, which has actually rekindled the debate and brought this issue at front of the curative jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. A very, very important piece of article for your Indian polity and constitution and governance. And with reference to GS2, we have to also look at the various structure, organization and the functioning of the Indian judiciary. Now here, first let us understand what is curative jurisdiction, or in simple term, curative petition. Now, curative petition for the very first time originated in a very landmark Supreme Court case known as the Rupa Ashok Hooda versus Ashok Hooda 2022. And in this case, a very important piece of question came before the Supreme Court. The question was whether an aggrieved person is entitled to any relief against the final judgment of the Supreme Court after the dismissal of a review petition. That means, say, after a final judgment by the Supreme Court, right? We know that a judgment by the Supreme Court is anyways final, but in some cases, the aggrieved petitioners, they can also move the Supreme Court for a review petition. And say, for example, there are some issues in the review petition judgment which is given by the Supreme Court. Now, what is the final outcome of the particular case? Now, in those cases, and it is, let me tell you, it is actually the rarest of rarest cases when the Supreme Court can also review its review judgment sometimes, right? And here, this is particular to address a grave miscarriage of justice, particularly due to any bias by the particular judges, or say any violation of the natural principle justice in the particular, say, discourse of the Supreme Court discussions and the orders. And here we have two important cases. The first important case is the Union of India versus Union Carbide case. This is also infamously known as the Bhopal gas tragedy case. And here earlier the Supreme Court gave a compensation to the victims of the crisis here. But later the Supreme Court revised its own judgment and totally made a fresh judgment and told that previous compensation was not enough for the victims, because in the Bhopal gas tragedy we know that the long-term effects of this tragedy was actually much profound, and even right now the victims are suffering from the issue that took place around 20-30 years before. And here we also have another Supreme Court case where the name of the case is Navneet Kaur versus State of NCT 2024, where a prisoner who was actually given a death sentence, the death sentence was actually overturned again by the Supreme Court. That means the judgment was overturned, citing that mental health issues can be one of the reasons for a person not be given a death sentence. And here the Supreme Court overturned the death sentence and commuted it to a life imprisonment for the prisoner. And these two cases highlight that sometimes Supreme Court needs to overlook again and look back at its judgment again sometimes, and the criteria for that it can be due to a bias of a particular judge. That means during the conduct of the Supreme Court case, particular judge or judges, they must not have properly heard the cases, or say looked at the long-term application, or say long-term consequences of the particular dispute. Then also Supreme Court can also sometimes uphold the natural justice issues of the particular case too. And here, for the curative petition, the Supreme Court has actually released some guidelines. Firstly, for any curative petition to be accepted, it must be receiving a certification from the senior advocate of the Supreme Court. Second, it must be reviewed by 3 senior most judges of the Supreme Court, followed by the judges from the original case, that is the previous case, right? So those judges should also be involved. And finally, the hearing will also be started with the previous judge or say judges which actually heard the case before, and this is actually mostly, that means always this does not take place. It can be the same that the previous judges have retired, so a new set of bench will be constituted, but mostly what happens, the same judges who heard the case previously, they will be hearing it again. And finally, Supreme Court has actually also declared amicus curiae, or say a friend of the court, right? That means there must be a particular advocate who will be assisting the Supreme Court in these matters of this curative petition. Next, it will be also a discretion, entirely discretion of the Supreme Court whether to accept a curative petition or not. And finally, if the curative petition has been found frivolous or it does not have any merit, the Supreme Court also can impose significant penalties or costs on the concerned parties. And here we have to draw some line between the review petition and the curative petition. So this is perfectly highlighted by this table here. Now the review petition is actually directly mentioned in the Constitution article of 137, but the same is not there with respect to curative petition. It is based on the Ashok Hooda versus Hooda case of 2002, and this is actually based by the Supreme Court itself. The purpose is to actually in review petitions to correct a patent mistake or say any kind of errors and omissions in the previous Supreme Court judgments. But here it is to address a violation of maybe a fundamental rights, a bias of the judges, and also violation of natural justice in cases where the review petition was actually rejected. The likelihood of success of a review petition is much more higher, while the curative petition is totally based on the Supreme Court's discretion, and it is also extremely low when we talk about the success. And finally, the time to file review petition is within the 30 days of the judgment, and here it is after the review petition has been rejected. And that is why the curative petition is kind of reflective of the idea that laws must be progressive. That means, say for example, a Supreme Court can make a judgment in the 1980s, but from 1980s till now, right, times have changed, right? Maybe society has progressed and the laws back then is no longer maybe accepted broadly by the society right now. And this is particularly highlighted by many Supreme Court cases right now. For example, the right to privacy, right? The clamor for right for the homosexuals in the country, right? So these are the various amount of societal changes that actually require that laws must be progressive, and that's why this also validates this validity of the curative petition. And here this was also reflected in this case of Delhi Metro versus Delhi Airport Metro, where earlier the Supreme Court actually awarded a particular fine on the Delhi Metro rail, right? But later it also reversed its judgment on the same, right? But we do not look into the details of the case of this Delhi Metro versus Delhi Airport Metro, but we need to understand that this is the latest instance where we have this example of the Supreme Court using its curative petition discretion. And here we also have to look at the other special powers of the Supreme Court. Now we understood that curative petition and the various aspects of the same, features of the same, is a special power of the Supreme Court. We have to look at the various others for our revision purpose. See, according to Article 131, the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, right, or say first-hand jurisdiction on the various issues and disputes that is taking place between the government of India, or say the central versus the states, or say between the states, right? Now, again under Article 136, we have special leave to appeal. That means when we have various instances of appeals from say the lower judiciary to the upper judiciary and say to the high courts and the Supreme Court can tell, right, that any petition, when it is actually subjected to appeal, they can directly appeal to the Supreme Court. Again, let me tell you, this is a discretionary power by the Supreme Court. And here this does not apply to the military tribunals and the court martials. In Article 143, the Supreme Court is actually having an advisory jurisdiction when the President of India, when the President of the country for any matters, right, it can seek the Supreme Court's or the court's opinion on the same. Next, Articles 129 and Article 142 is also giving the contempt power to the Supreme Court based on, say, criminal and civil contempt of the court. And this can be based on, say, individual matter, right? And say various other collective matters also, on a suo motu, or say a petition by Attorney General of India or Solicitor General of India or any other individuals, right? So Supreme Court on itself can also initiate the contempt cases. It can be also based on the petition of AGI or SGI or any other individuals too. And finally, Article 145 is actually giving the Supreme Court the authority to make rules for the functioning of the Supreme Court themselves. It can be related to various practice, procedures and various other rules of the Supreme Court here. In the next article, we'll be looking at the recent data from the ISRO and only the most important data from the same on the glacial lakes of the country. And here, this is a very important topic for your prelims with reference to Indian and world geography, particularly to the glacial landforms we'll be discussing briefly here. Next, in GS3, we also look into the various changes in critical geographical features, again where glaciers have been a very important and recurring topic for the UPSC in the PYQs mains. Now, to start with glacial lakes. Now see, glacial lakes are actually bodies of water which are formed by the melting of glaciers. Now we know glaciers are actually huge heaps of ice, right, which are actually frozen at very sub-zero temperatures on high altitudes, higher reaches of the mountains. Now when this ice is actually melting over a period of time, particularly due to global warming, we find that the water, right, of the ice is actually deposited in various landforms on the mountains. So the water that is deposited in various landforms due to many reasons, right, one of the four of the reasons we'll be discussing here, those are actually known as glacial lakes, and these are actually formed due to the melting of the ice, due to the erosion of the mountain landscape, due to the pressure of the glaciers and various other reasons also. Now see, the very first kind of glacial lake that we find in the country and also in the part of in the rest of the world are actually known as cirque lakes. Now these are actually bowl shaped depression, as you can see in this particular picture, and these are very small but very deep lakes located at very higher reaches of the mountains, right? Next, we also have moraine dammed lakes. These are actually the piles of debris which is actually left behind a glacier once it melts, right? And these also dams a particular valley, and you can see here these are the moraine dams lakes where the glacier from here, the water from here has melted and this has deposited in here, and this is actually a feature of the dams formed by the moraines, or say the debris. It can be rocks and various pieces of other mountain materials. Next, we have the ice dams lakes. Now these are ice dam lakes are actually formed when a glacier dams a valley with ice. Dams means it is totally blocking, creating a blockage in the valley with ice. So you can find the same here. This is a particular example of an ice dam lake when the entire valleys are actually totally blockaded. And here, this is a very dangerous kind of a glacial lake which can actually lead to glacial lake outburst floods. That means once these dams, right, of these particular glaciers become inundated with more and more water, melting water, this can suddenly breach the barriers or say the mountain landforms surrounding them and can totally cause a flood, glacial flood, and typically posing danger to life and livelihood downhill in the valley. And finally, we also have low glacial lakes which are actually formed in front of a retreating glacier. As you can see here, these are vast amount of glaciers surrounding it, and here on this, in this particular point, the glacier ice is actually melting, and this is actually leaving behind a great depression that fills with water. Now this glacier is retreating back, that means the ice is melting and it is converting into water. This is melting back, but it is creating a heavy amount of depression. Now ISRO recently conducted a detailed remote sensing survey on the various amount of glacial lakes in the country. The first thing that the data actually revealed to us is actually something which we know as retreating glaciers. Now retreating glaciers, as you can easily understand from these pictures here. See, this is actually the pictures of the same mountains over a period of time, right? See, this mountain in the Himalayas in 1956 was fully covered with snow. You can not find an inch without snow here in the mountain. But see the picture in 2007. See the areas here. It has been totally denuded of the snow. And where did the snow go? Obviously, the snow actually converted into water due to global warming, and these formed glacious lakes surrounding the region. Also, you can see at this image here, directly at the glacier site. In 1956, this you can see at the moraine site, and here we find that in 1956 it was full of say ice, and in this glacier parts we can see this full of ice. But here in this part you can see, right, a lake has formed. Why? Because the ice have melted and the glaciers have actually receded to the higher altitude of the mountain right now. You cannot find the glaciers anywhere here anymore. So this is a condition which is known as retreating glaciers, and this condition is never good for the mountain ecosystem. And see, the ISRO remote sensing satellite study which was actually looking at the data from 1986 to 2023, it analyzed the satellite imagery covering the various catchments of the Indian river basins in India, Nepal, Bhutan and the Tibet region of China. So it looked at the various amount of glaciers, and it concluded that definitely we see that the glaciers are retreating at a very faster rate than ever due to global warming. And here out of the total around 676 glacial lakes which have been studied here, right, they have expanded significantly. That means these lakes are expanding significantly over a period of time, and around 601 lakes have doubled in size. Now doubling in size, increasing lakes are not a good news, right? I told you retreating glaciers are not ever a good news. And here 10 lakes have grown in size between 1.5 to 2 times, 65 lakes have grown around 1.5 times. And why have I given you this kind of data? Because you have to code this in your mains answers whenever you are talking about anything related to climate change, glaciers. So please do remember to code this data from ISRO, a very, very important piece of data. Now the consequences of the same is that obviously when we look at the retreating glaciers and the increasing amount of water levels in these landscapes. Now remember, these landscapes are not designed to hold waters. Obviously when we have melting water from the ice, we find that this water is creating pressure on the rest of the Himalayan mountain ecosystem, and this is putting pressure not only on the ecosystem but also on the rock structure of the Himalayan landforms, and this is actually leading to glacial lake outburst floods. I told this before also. When this water is actually say being inundated by the say melting waters, right, these lakes sometimes outbursts, and by outburst means that these barriers, for example say here is the water and here the barrier is breached, causing significant downpour of water down the valley, and this leads to many amount of destruction, as we have also seen the same recently in Himachal Pradesh and also Uttarakhand over the last few years. It also leads to rise in sea level, because ultimately we have to understand the melting of the glaciers will be obviously depositing some waters in the glacial lakes, and the rest of the water will be also transported through the rivers, Indian rivers, into the Bay of Bengal, right, and also into the Arabian Sea, and this will be leading to increase in sea level also. And finally, we find that whenever we talk about this glacial water, we know that these are actually fresh water, and we also understand that whenever the ice is melting, the water will be directly flowing down into the seas and the oceans, and this fresh water, when it is meeting with the saline waters, it is leading to the decrease in the salinity of the ocean. And when we understand the salinity of the ocean is decreasing, the more heating of the sea and the ocean is also possible, right? And here this also gives rise to more and more extreme weather events, particularly when we talk of India and the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. We are seeing an increasing amount of cyclones right now. So one of the reasons for increasing amount of cyclone, apart from global warming, is actually the melting and retreating of the Himalayan glaciers. Now here, the remote sensing application that we use, we have to discuss a little bit about that also here. See, the main benefits of using remote sensing to survey the various Himalayan glaciers, particularly if you can see here, this is one more data, right? We see that the area before in 1989 was actually of this lake was very small. That means there were more glaciers present surrounding, but right now the areas has increased. And let me tell you, these are very challenging mountain systems. Now manually scientists and say geologists, they cannot go there and study. So it is actually made possible by the ISRO satellites, right, to actually overcome the manual challenging amount of data collection that is required for this kind of data. Next, this satellite data, remote sensing data, is actually giving wider coverage and also revisiting capability. That means, say for example, you looked at this data, or say you looked at this glacial lake in 1989. You can again see the lake in 1990 also, 1991 also. So you can come back and look at the same lake and observe the changes over a period of time, right? Now this is not possible when we actually send out geologists and scientists out to those actual areas, right? It will be taking a lot of time, and maybe the harsh climates will not be suitable for them. Next, it is also addressing the environmental impacts and also developing, and is also helping the country developing strategies by studying this kind of data and coming up with these observations. And also it is helping to give early warning system by looking at those glacial lakes which is very prone to outburst in the future, and they can cause floods. So it is also helping us to devise early warning systems too. And here we have to also look at how these risks can be mitigated. Firstly, see, in 2023, using the same remote sensing data here, in the Gepan Lake in Himachal Pradesh, Sisu area, right? We have Sisu area just above Manali, and here the team studied that if we try to, take out the water that is depositing in the glacial lakes, right? The town of Sisu, right, which is just located nearby the lake only, it can be saved from the risk. And here the study estimated that if we can take out around 10 to 30 meters of water by lowering the water table, right, we can significantly reduce the risk of GLOFs which will be taking place here. And back in, say, 2016-17, we also tried the same in Sikkim area, where the authorities, the state disaster management authority, tried to siphon lake water, that is taking out the lake water, and it took place in Sikkim's South Lonak Lake using high density polyethylene pipes. So let this be, very innovative suggestions from your side to be presented in your mains answers again. In the next article, we'll be looking at system loading units. This is following the recent Supreme Court judgment on the, say, various features and the functionalities of the electronic voting machines. And Supreme Court on Friday directed the Election Commission of India to actually sell and secure the symbol loading unit for 45 days until the declaration of the election results. Now, this is very, very important for general science here, because now we are talking about obviously Indian elections, which is under polity, but we have to look into how this machine is actually working. Now, we know that whenever we go out to exercise our franchise, and definitely guys, I want all of you, right, who are eligible to vote, do definitely go out and cast your vote, right? This will be giving you an opportunity to actually represent your nation and represent your choices in the elections here, the result of which will be also seen over the next 5 years. So please do exercise your vote very wisely. Now, coming back to the topic, the system loading units are very, very important components of the electronic voting machines. And here, let us understand how this operates. Now, when you will be going to vote, right, you will be saying that you have to cast your vote via a button, right? That is the EVM machine, and that machine is actually connected to something which we know as VVPAT machine. Now, that VVPAT machine, after you have casted a vote for a particular candidate of a particular political party, that preference of yours will be printed out in the VVPAT and will be displayed to you for a phrase, 2 or 3 seconds, and you have to verify that if your vote that you have actually casted is actually deposited or not, right? So you will be verifying the same through that VVPAT machine. But can we ask this question, how that VVPAT machine is actually knowing the name and the candidate, or how this overall system is actually knowing the name of the candidate, the symbols and every other details? It is actually possible via this system loading units. Now, this SLU or system loading units is actually used to load the symbols of the candidates into VVPAT machine. Right? Now imagine that you want to listen to a very interesting song, right? So what do? You actually download that song, you say copy that song in your pen drive, and say you put that pen drive in your computer, and then you can play the song, right? Almost the same concept is used here. What is done here? Firstly, these SLUs are actually loaded with the candidate's name and information by connecting to a PC or laptop, right? Now again, these particular say names and other details are actually loaded into VVPAT machine via a symbol loading application. And here the symbol loading application will be actually loading a bitmap file. Now bitmap file will be carrying the candidate's name, serial number, symbols, right? And then these SLUs will be connected to the VVPAT to transfer this bitmap to the paper audit machine. So in this way, the VVPAT machine and the EVM is actually knowing the name of the candidate and also printing out the various images and the names of the candidate for your reference. Now this SLU is actually carrying no relevance in the actual voting process. SLU is only important before the machines are loaded with the names and symbols, right? Typically it takes place around, say, even as close as 2 days before the elections, but during the elections it does not play any active role. It is actually playing a role before the elections, and after the elections these SLUs are actually handed to the district election officer, who later transfers this or gives it back to the various other election commission agents and the Election Commission of India, who will be using these machines again for the next phase of the elections in other constituencies. Now here, the recent Supreme Court ruling told that currently only 3 components of the EVM, that is the ballot unit, right, EVM, control unit and the VVPAT are stored. The data is stored for 45 days after the election. So after elections, if there are any disputes, that the High Court of the country can look into the election disputes, right, and they have to look into the various data of the elections too. Now Supreme Court told that SLUs must be also be sealed and stored immediately for a period of 45 days till after the declaration of the results too. Now what is actually changing on the ground? Nothing is changing for us as voters, right? But for the Election Commission of India, they have to now store this for more than 45 days, around 45 days, and they also have to incur additional costs of the SLU units too. In the next article, we will be looking at an international collaboration to conserve the various corals, and is actually named as Coral Zoos. And here, this is actually an initiative of corals being bred in a zoo, and this is actually by creating Europe's largest coral reef. And let me tell you first that due to global warming and climate change, the coral species of the various oceans from the various oceans of the country is actually in stress. Now coral is actually consisted of 2 living creatures, zooxanthellae, which is an algae, right, and the coral polyp. So it is a zooxanthellae which is actually residing on the coral polyp, and this is actually also a symbiotic relationship. That means the zooxanthellae is giving food to the coral polyp, and the coral polyp is giving a shelter to the zooxanthellae, or say the algae here. So that is why we find various colors and features of the corals due to the presence of this algae here. Now due to global warming, we find that the coral bleaching is taking place, which is actually the expulsion of zooxanthellae from the coral tissues of, or say, the coral polyps. And that is why there is this World Coral Conservatory project which is trying to create a bank of corals in aquariums all across Europe. So this here, the various species and specimens of the corals has been collected from various parts of the world, where is actually the coral bleaching is being seen, and here these coral species are actually being bred in captivity, and various conservation efforts are actually taking place, and this is actually taking place for a long-term vision to actually again repopulate the wild coral species which have actually bleached in their original locations. So healthy corals from these aquariums, later they can be replanted back in these regions where the coral bleaching has been taking place. And right now we also have to understand that this coral species is actually home to 25% of the marine animals who actually spend at least some part of their lives on the coral reef. So we can understand 1/4 of the marine individual or of the marine species are actually dependent on the corals. And this is not the only say international collaboration. We have various other efforts too. We have the Aichi Target 10 of, say, biodiversity, which is actually promoted to protect corals in the world. We also have this Coral Reef Breakthrough, which is an initiative of the International Coral Reef Initiative, where India is also a part of, plus the Global Fund for Coral Reefs and the High Level Climate Champions. So please do remember such initiatives, because coral is a very, very important and a favorite topic for UPSC in prelims. And the main ambition here is to actually secure around 125,000 square kilometers of coral land, and this will be achieved through around $12 billion of funding by 2030. We also have this Coral Triangle initiative, as we see here. This is the area covering Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Timor, Papua New Guinea, parts of Australia, and also Solomon Islands. This is actually famously known as the Coral Triangle, where most of the world's coral are actually formed. And this is actually tried to actually protect this region. Then we have this Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, which is looking into the monitoring aspects of the corals. And finally, we have the BioRock technology, which is actually trying to populate the coral populations using pulses of electricity. And here, using electricity, the original corals are actually being generated again in various parts of the world, including our own India in Gujarat. Now here, in 2022, UPSC asked a question on the BioRock technology, and I want all of your answers in the comment section. Finally, we'll be looking at Prelims Snippets, 4 important articles. We'll be starting with Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's a very, very important international organization. This was also asked by UPSC in 2021 mains. Now, Shanghai Cooperation Organization was founded in 2001 by Kazakhstan, China, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. So, and also the main ambition of this organization is cooperation and mutual support in trade aspects, investment, energy, transportation and security. And it is this security only where this main context of this article is, because according to SCO and India's participation in the same, India is telling that we must be adopting zero tolerance towards terrorism, and security is a very, very important role of the same. And the official language of the ACO Secretariat is Russian and Chinese. India, for the very first time, the talks of joining India in ACO was started at Al-Ufa Summit in 2015, and it was in Astana in 2017 where India formally joined the SCO. So, India is not a founding member of the SCO. The members right now is China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Iran and Uzbekistan. Iran is the latest entrant in 2021 and Pakistan entered the same time in 2017 in SCO along with India. In the next one, we'll be looking at Nilgiri Tar survey, where recently the Tamil Nadu government is collaborating with WWF and various other organizations such as IUCN to undergo a survey to estimate the population of tars in the region. Now see, Nilgiri Tar, right, is actually based on the IUCN conservation status. It is falling under the endangered, and this is present in the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. If you look at the distribution, they are located only in India and only in India within this Western Ghat region. And also most of them are actually concentrated in the Annamalai Tiger Reserve and the Eravikulam National Park in Kerala. Now, according to WWF India 2015 survey, there are around only 3000 tars in the Western Ghats. Now, when we talk about the animal's behavior, it thrives in the cold and wet climate of the Western Ghats, and that is why it has a very thick fur. And also their hooves, that is their feet, right? They are specially adapted to actually climb even taller, mountains and landscapes. And let me tell you, they are not nocturnal. They are actually early morning species, and particularly they can graze even till late afternoons. Finally, we have these small finance banks, where the small finance banks provide basic banking services to the population, where these basic banking services are actually in form of deposits and loans. They can even give credit cards to the people. And also when we talk about their overall loans, around 50% of their loans should be in small loans, or say less than 25 lakhs or exactly 25 lakhs. When we look at their priority sector lending or lending in education sector, agriculture sectors, startup, renewables, women, self-help groups, so they have to lend around 75% of their total loans to the priority sectors. And also for an initial period of 3 years, their branches must be in the rural areas. That is, more than around 70% of their branches must be in the rural areas. And here recently the RBI has announced this on-tap licensing, or say instant approval for any small finance banks or any other banks to be converted to universal banks, right? So this is an RBI initiative where it is actually helping the banks to convert into universal banks. Universal banks are actually those banks who are offering many wide amount of services such as insurance, deposit, loan services, under one umbrella. So for small finance banks to be actually universal banks right now, RBI has actually given these norms. Firstly, their minimum worth must be of minimum of 1000 crore. Their shares must be listed on a stock exchange. They must be having a net profit over the last 2 financial years. And finally, the gross non-performing assets must be equal to or less than 3% in also the last 2 financial years. And in the last article today, we'll be looking at Bima Vistar. According to 2022-2023 financial year, the insurance penetration, or say the number of people with insurance schemes in India, is at 4% only, and this has decreased from 2022 from 4.2%. This is according to Swiss Re Sigma report. But when we look at the global levels of insurance penetration, this is 6.8%, which is actually higher. So India is lagging behind when we talk about insurance. It can be life insurance, health insurance, or any kind of general insurance too. And when we talk about the insurance premium per say individual, we find that term is known as insurance density. In India, it has increased 292 in 2023 financial year from $91 in financial year 2022. Now that is why the IRDAI, the insurance regulator, in the country, has introduced a Bima Vistar scheme. This is a scheme which is having affordable pricing at 1,500 per policy. This is giving comprehensive coverage of life, health, personal, accident and property insurance. Sum assured will be 2 lakh each for life, personal and various other segments of the insurance, and additionally a health cover will also be given, which is known as hospital cash, which is given for 500 rupees for 10 days up to 5,000 rupees without needing any bills or any documents. So I hope you all have understood and enjoyed a lot in today's discussion, and thank you all for your patience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up. All the best for your future endeavors till we meet again soon. Thank you.